The Odyssey drifted silently through the void, its engines humming softly as the crew went about their duties. On the bridge, Captain Elena Reyes leaned back in her chair, her sharp eyes scanning the star map projected before her. The ship had been exploring uncharted sectors for months, and the monotony of deep space was beginning to wear on everyone. To break the silence, Lieutenant Marcus Hale, the ship's pilot and resident jokester, brought up the old legend of the ghost ship. "You know, Captain," Marcus said, a grin spreading across his face, "we're in the exact sector where they say the ghost ship appears. You think we'll get lucky and catch a glimpse of it?" Elena rolled her eyes. "The ghost ship is a myth, Marcus. A story told to scare rookies and keep them from straying too far off course. There's no such thing as a ship that appears out of nowhere, destroys entire fleets, and vanishes without a trace." "But what if it's real?" Marcus pressed, his tone playful but with a hint of curiosity. "I mean, every myth has some truth to it, right?" Before Elena could respond, the ship's sensors blared an alert. Ensign Priya Patel, the Odyssey's science officer, quickly analyzed the data. "Captain, we're picking up an anomaly, a massive object drifting about 50,000 kilometers off our port side. It's not emitting any energy signatures, but its size, it's comparable to a capital ship." Elena straightened in her chair, put on the main screen. The crew watched as the image of a colossal, derelict ship filled the view screen. Its hull was sleek and angular, covered in strange, glowing runes that pulsed faintly in the darkness. The ship looked ancient, yet it was eerily pristine, as if time itself had refused to touch it. "That's not one of ours," Marcus muttered, his earlier humor replaced by awe. "No," Elena agreed. "It's not." The crew debated whether to investigate or retreat. Some argued that the ship could be a trap, while others were too curious to pass up the opportunity. In the end, Elena made the decision. "We're explorers. This is what we do. Prepare a shuttle. We're boarding that ship." As the shuttle approached the derelict vessel, the crew couldn't shake the feeling of unease. The ship's design was unlike anything they had ever seen, its architecture both beautiful and alien. When they docked and stepped aboard, the air was cold and still, the only sound a faint hum of the ship's dormant systems. The crew split into teams to explore. Elena, Marcus, and Priya made their way to what appeared to be the bridge. The walls were lined with consoles, their surfaces covered in more of the glowing runes. Priya studied them closely, her eyes wide with fascination. This technology, it's centuries ahead of anything we have, maybe even millennia. Marcus ran a hand over one of the consoles, and the runes flared to life. A holographic interface materialized in the air, displaying streams of data in an unfamiliar language. Guys, I think I just woke it up." Before anyone could respond, a voice echoed to the chamber, deep and resonant. "Intruders identified. Scanning. Human species detected. Access granted." The crew froze as a figure materialized before them, a shimmering hologram of a humanoid figure with glowing eyes. "I am Eidolon, the artificial intelligence of this vessel. You have awakened me from my long slumber." Elena stepped forward, her voice steady despite the tension in the air. "We mean no harm. We're explorers from a human vessel Odyssey. We found your ship adrift and wanted to learn more about it." Eidolon regarded her for a moment before responding. "Your curiosity is commendable, but your timing is unfortunate. A great threat approaches this sector, a hostile alien armada known as the Vorith. They seek to destroy all life in their path." Priya frowned. "The Vorith? We've never heard of them." "You will," Eidolon said grimly. "They are relentless and merciless. This ship was created to stand against them, but even I am not enough to stop them alone." Elena exchanged glances with her crew. "If what you're saying is true, then we need to warn our people. But if the ship is as powerful as you say, maybe we can use it to fight back." Eidolon nodded. "That is my purpose. But know this, the power within this ship comes at a cost. It was built by a civilization that sacrificed everything to create it. If we are to succeed, you must be willing to make the same sacrifices." The crew fell silent, the weight of Eidolon's words settling over them. They had come seeking answers, but now they faced a choice that could change the course of history. As they returned to the Odyssey, Elena couldn't shake the feeling that they had stumbled into something far bigger than themselves. The ghost ship was no myth. It was a weapon, a guardian, and a last hope. And now, it was their responsibility to wield it. The section ends of the crew preparing for the battle to come, their resolve hardened by the knowledge of what they now faced. The legend of the ghost ship had become their reality, and they were determined to ensure its legacy would not be in vain. The Odyssey's crew worked tirelessly alongside Eidolon, their movements quick and purposeful as they prepared the ghost ship for battle. The ancient vessel, now fully awakened, hummed with low, resonant energy that seemed to pulse through its very structure. Every console, every weapon system, every inch of the ship was a marvel of technology far beyond human comprehension. And yet the crew had no time to marvel at it. The Vorth were coming, and the ghost ship was their only hope. Elena stood on the bridge, her eyes fixed on the holographic display that showed the approaching Vorth fleet. The alien armada was massive, a swarm of sleek, predatory ships that moved with terrifying precision. She clenched her fists, her mind racing as she tried to formulate a plan. Eidolon *. How long until they're in range? Approximately 2 hours, the AI replied, its voice calm but urgent. Their fleet is larger than anticipated. We will need to utilize every advantage this ship possesses. Marcus, who had been working on recalibrating the ship's cloaking device, looked up from his console. Cloaking's online, but it's not perfect. If we use it too much, the power drain could leave us vulnerable. Priya, meanwhile, was studying the ship's weapon systems. The singularity cannon is operational, but it's a one-shot deal. Once we fire it, it'll take hours to recharge. We'll need to make it count. Elena nodded, her mind racing. We'll use the cloaking device to get close, hit them hard, and then retreat before they can regroup. We can't take them head-on, not with their numbers. As the crew finalized their strategy, Eidolon provided them with critical information about the Vorth. The alien species was a hive mind, their ships controlled by a central intelligence that coordinated their movements with terrifying efficiency. If they could disrupt that coordination, even for a moment, it might give them the edge they needed. When the Vorth fleet finally entered the sector, the ghost ship was ready. The crew watched in tense silence as the alien ships began their assault, their weapons tearing through a nearby colony with brutal efficiency. The sight of the destruction hardened their resolve. Activate the cloak, Elena ordered. The ghost ship vanished from sight, its systems running silently as it moved into position. The crew held their breath, their eyes glued to the sensors as they approached the heart of the Vorth fleet. Now, Elena said, her voice steady. The ghost ship decloaked in the middle of the enemy formation, its weapons blazing. The singularity cannon fired first, a massive burst of energy that tore through several Vorth ships in an instant. The crew cheered as the enemy vessels exploded, their debris scattering into the void. But the Vorth were quick to respond. Their ships swarmed the ghost ship, their weapons pounding against its shields. The crew worked frantically to keep the ship operational, their hands flying over the consoles as they redirected power and repaired damaged systems. Shields at 60%. Marcus shouted, "We can't take much more of this." Priya added, her voice strained. Elena gritted her teeth. Eidolon *. Can we cloak again? Not without risking a complete power failure, the AI replied. Then we'll have to fight our way out, Elena said. Target their command ship. If we can take it out, it might buy us some time. The ghost ship turned its weapons on the Vorth command vessel, a massive dreadnought that loomed over the battlefield. The crew fired everything they had, their weapons tearing into the enemy ship's hull. For a moment, it seemed like they might succeed, but then the Vorth flagship retaliated, its weapons striking the ghost ship with devastating force. The ship shuddered violently, its systems flickering as the power grid struggled to compensate. Shields down. Marcus yelled, "We're losing power." Priya added. Elena gripped the edge of her console, her mind racing. Eidolon *. Is there anything we can do? The AI hesitated for a moment before responding. There is one option. We can overload the singularity cannon. It will destroy the Vorth flagship, But it will also cripple this ship. The crew exchanged grim looks. They knew what that meant. If they did this, they might not make it out alive. Do it, Elena said, her voice firm. The crew worked quickly, rerouting power to the singularity cannon and preparing it for the overload. The Vorth flagship loomed closer, its weapons charging for another attack. Cannon ready? Priya said. Fire, Elena ordered. The ghost ship unleashed a massive burst of energy, the overloaded singularity cannon tearing to the Vorth flagship and obliterating it in a blinding explosion. The shockwave rippled through the battlefield, scattering the remaining Vorth ships and leaving the ghost ship adrift, its systems failing. As the crew struggled to stabilize the ship, they knew the battle was far from over. The Vorth would regroup, and when they did, the ghost ship would need to be ready. The section ends with the crew battered but determined, their resolve unshaken as they prepared for the next phase of the fight. The ghost ship had proven its worth, but the cost of victory was high, and the war was just beginning. The ghost ship drifted in the aftermath of the battle, its systems flickering as the crew worked to stabilize the vessel. The Vorth fleet had been thrown into disarray by the destruction of their flagship, but the respite was temporary. Sensors indicated that the remaining enemy ships were regrouping, their movements chaotic but purposeful. The crew knew it was only a matter of time before the Vorth launched another attack. Elena stood on the bridge, her eyes fixed on the holographic display that showed the scattered Vorth forces. Eidolon asterisk. How long until they're back on offensive? Approximately 1 hour, the AI replied. Their command structure is fractured, but they are adapting quickly. We must act before they regain cohesion. Marcus, who had been monitoring the ship's power grid, looked up from his console. We've got enough power for one more big move, but after that, we're running on fumes. Whatever we do, it has to count. Priya, meanwhile, was studying the surrounding space. There's a nebula nearby, dense clouds of ionized gas that could disrupt their sensors. If we lure them in, we might be able to level the playing field. Elena considered the idea. If we can blind them, we can hit them hard and fast. But we'll need to be careful. Our own systems could be affected. The crew quickly devised a plan. Using the ghost ship's cloaking device, they would draw the Vorth into the nebula, where the dense gas would interfere with their sensors and communications. Once inside, they would use the environment to their advantage, striking from the shadows and picking off the enemy ships one by one. As the Vorth fleet began to regroup, the ghost ship activated its cloak and moved toward the nebula. The crew held their breath as they entered the swirling clouds of gas, the ship's sensors flickering as they adjusted to the interference. They're following us, Marcus reported, his voice tense. Good, Elena said. Let's lead them deeper. The ghost ship moved through the nebula like a phantom, its presence masked by the dense gas. The Vorth ships followed blindly, their sensors unable to penetrate the haze. The crew waited until the enemy was fully within the nebula before making their move. Now, Elena ordered. The ghost ship decloaked and opened fire, its weapons tearing to the disoriented Vorth ships. The enemy vessels struggled to respond, their movements sluggish and uncoordinated. The crew pressed their advantage, striking with precision and efficiency. But the Vorth were not defenseless. Their ships began to adapt, their sensors slowly piercing through the interference. The battle intensified as the enemy regained their footing, their weapons finding their mark. Shields at 40%. Marcus shouted, We're taking too much damage. Priya added. Elena clenched her fists, her mind racing. Eidolon asterisk. Is there anything we can do to amplify our weapons? The AI hesitated for a moment before responding. The nebula's ionized gas could be used to enhance our energy weapons, but would require a massive power surge. It could overload our systems. Do it, Elena said without hesitation. The crew worked quickly, rerouting power to the ship's energy weapons and channeling the nebula's ionized gas into systems. The ghost ship's weapons flared to life, their energy amplified by the surrounding environment. Fire, Elena ordered. The ship unleashed a devastating barrage, its enhanced weapons tearing through the Vorth fleet with unprecedented power. The enemy ships were obliterated in moments, their remains scattering into the nebula. But the victory came at a cost. The power surge overloaded the Ghost ship systems, leaving it crippled and adrift. The crew worked frantically to stabilize the vessel, their hands flying over the consoles as they struggled to keep it operational. "We've lost main power," Marcus yelled. "Life support is failing." Priya added. Elena gripped the edge of her console, her mind racing. Asterisk Eidolon asterisk. "Can we get out of here?" "Not without significant repairs," the AI replied. "But the Vorth are retreating. We have bought ourselves some time." The crew breathed a collective sigh of relief, but they knew the battle was far from over. The Vorth would return, and when they did, the Ghost ship would need be ready. The section ends with the crew battered but determined, their resolve unshaken as they prepared for the next phase of the fight. The Ghost ship had proven its worth, but the cost of victory was high, and the war was just beginning. The Ghost ship hung adrift in the nebula, its systems barely functional after the brutal battle. The crew worked tirelessly to stabilize the vessel, their movements quick and precise despite the exhaustion etched into their faces. The Vorth fleet had retreated, but the victory felt hollow. The ship was crippled, its power reserves nearly depleted, and the crew knew it was only a matter of time before the enemy returned. Elena stood on the bridge, her eyes scanning the holographic display that showed the surrounding space. The nebula's swirling clouds of gas provided some cover, but it wouldn't last forever. Asterisk Eidolon asterisk. How long until we can get the engines back online? "Approximately 2 hours," the AI replied. "But even then, we will not be at full capacity. The Vorth will return before we are ready." Marcus, who had been working on the power grid, looked up from his console. "We've got enough juice for one last move, but it's risky. If we push the systems too hard, we could fry them completely." Priya, meanwhile, was studying the ship's weapon systems. "The singularity cannon is completely offline. Even if we had the power, it's too damaged to use. We're down to basic weapons, and whatever tricks we can pull out of our sleeves." Elena nodded, her mind racing. "We need to buy ourselves more time. If we can't fight them head-on, we'll have to outsmart them." The crew quickly devised a plan. Using the nebula's ionized gas, they would create a series of false signals to confuse the Vorta's sensors. The Ghost ship would remain hidden while the enemy wasted time chasing decoys. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was the best they had. As the crew worked to set up the decoys, Eidolon provided them with critical information about the Vorta's tactics. The alien species relied heavily on their hive mind, their ships moving in perfect synchronization. If the crew could disrupt that synchronization, even for a moment, it might give them the edge they needed. When the Vorth fleet returned, the Ghost ship was ready. The enemy ships moved cautiously, their sensors scanning the nebula for any sign of their prey. The crew watched in tense silence as the Vorth fell for the decoys, their ships splitting off to investigate the false signals. "Now!" Elena ordered. The Ghost ship decloaked and opened fire, its weapons striking the isolated Vorth ships with precision. The enemy vessels were caught off guard, their movements sluggish and uncoordinated. The crew pressed their advantage, striking quickly and retreating before the Vorth could regroup. But the Vorth were quick to adapt. Their ships began to converge, their weapons locking onto the Ghost ship. The crew worked frantically to keep the vessel operational, their hands flying over the consoles as they redirected power and repaired damaged systems. "Shields at 20%. Marcus shouted. "We can't take much more of this." Priya added, her voice strained. Elena gritted her teeth. Asterisk Eidolon asterisk. "Is there anything we can do to turn the tide?" The AI hesitated for a moment before responding. "There is one option. We can overload the ship's core, creating a massive explosion that will destroy the Vorth fleet, but it will also destroy this ship." The crew exchanged grim looks. They knew what that meant. If they did this, they wouldn't survive. "Do it," Elena said, her voice firm. The crew worked quickly, rerouting power to the ship's core and preparing it for the overload. The Vorth fleet closed in, their weapons charging for another attack. "Core ready?" Priya said. "Initiate the overload," Elena ordered. The Ghost ship's core flared to life, its energy building to a critical level. The Vorth ships hesitated, their senses detecting the impending explosion. But it was too late. The ghost ship erupted in a blinding explosion, its energy tearing through the Vor fleet and obliterating everything in its path. The shockwave rippled through the nebula, scattering the remains of the enemy ships into the void. As the dust settled, the crew of the Odyssey watched from a safe distance, their hearts heavy with the loss of their comrades. The ghost ship was gone, but its legacy would endure. The section ends with the crew reflecting on the sacrifice of the ghost ship and its crew, their resolve unshaken as they prepare to continue the fight. The Vor had been dealt a devastating blow, but the war was far from over. The legend of the ghost ship would live on, a symbol of hope and resilience in the face of overwhelming odds.